Long ago, when I came in touch with Krishna consciousness for the first time, those 1 or 2 years around that time, I used to come across this word in Srila Prabhupada's books, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna saying that, Arjuna, now I shall explain to you the most confidential knowledge. Like in the 9th chapter, Krishna says, Idam tute guhyatamam pravakshyamya nasuyave. Guhyatamam means very, very confidential knowledge, I'm going to tell you. And this word and similar words come up again and again in the Bhagavad Gita. In the 4th chapter, Krishna says, Rahasyam hetuduttamam. And in the 18th chapter later on, Sarva guhyatamam bhuyaha shrunume paramam vachaha, and so on. So this word comes up in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna is saying that I'm going to tell you confidential knowledge. And this was very perplexing to me, because why is it called confidential knowledge? Because we understand if something is very confidential, we put that in a folder and put it in a locker and lock it up, and that's why it is called confidential, right? But then Bhagavad Gita, in ISKCON, we have published millions of copies and distributed all over the world. So it's no more confidential. And even before ISKCON got into printing and publishing and distributing Bhagavad Gita, we have that famous Gorakhpur Express in our country. For decades, they have been printing thousands and millions of copies and have been distributing in different languages in India. So how is this confidential? It's no more confidential. It's all out there. So this was very perplexing, and I used to ask and discuss with many people, and then I never got a proper satisfactory answer. Much later, I came across Srila Prabhupada explaining why it is called confidential. Very, very interesting explanation Srila Prabhupada gives. Prabhupada says this is called confidential knowledge because it requires certain qualifications to have access to that knowledge. And if you don't meet those qualifications, you will not be able to get access to that knowledge. And Prabhupada gives one example. Say, for instance, there is a man in the street, he's walking, and then he sees a board, bank, some bank, and then he walks into the bank, and then he's walking around, and then he comes, there is a counter, and there it says cashier. He peeps into that counter, and then he asks the cashier, how much money is there in the bank today? It's quite a dangerous question to ask, right? The cashier can call the security and have this man thrown out of the bank. Now, a few minutes later, the bank manager, he's going around and he's doing his rounds and looking at the different officials and the guests and the customers and so on. And then he comes to the cashier's counter. The bank manager also peeps into the cashier's counter and asks him, how much money is there in the bank today? And the cashier will immediately, respectfully open his ledger or look into his computer and say, sir, today there is so-and-so thousands, and up to the paisa, up to the last digit, he will tell them how much money is there in the bank. Now, this information, how much money is there in the bank, is confidential information. People who have requisite qualifications can have access to it. A man coming from the street has no qualifications to have access to that information, whereas a manager has the qualifications. So in the same way, the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita is confidential in the sense one should have requisite qualifications to understand this and to access this and to be able to come in touch with that. In fact, almost every time when Krishna uses the word confidential, immediately after that, he tells what is the qualification to have access to that knowledge. Like, for instance, in the 4th chapter, Krishna says, Bhaktosi me sakha cheti rahasyam hetaduttamam. Arjuna, this is a confidential knowledge, but you can understand because you are my devotee and friend. So, devotion to Krishna in a transcendental relationship, like a friendship relationship, is an important qualification to access that confidential knowledge. Later on, in the 9th chapter, Krishna says, Idam tute guhyatamam pravakshyamya nasuyave. There also he says, this is very confidential knowledge, but Arjuna, you can understand because you're not envious of me. So, being a devotee in a transcendental relationship and not being envious of Krishna. And there are a few more, which in the 18th chapter also Krishna mentions. In other words, these are the qualifications one must have in order to access the confidential knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, the mystery of the Bhagavad Gita will be evasive and one will not get that understanding. So this is an important factor for understanding Bhagavad Gita.
Hare Krishna. If you found this video interesting, do like it and share it with your loved ones. For more uplifting spiritual content, subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon.